The MiG-23 Flogger, the Soviet Union's variable geometry enigma. When the MiG-23 Flogger first sliced through the skies over Soviet airfields in the late 1960s, it represented a bold and controversial departure from Soviet fighter design philosophy. Conceived during the Cold War's technological crescendo, the MiG-23 was the Soviet Union's answer to Western multi-role supersonic fighters like the American F-4, Phantom II, and the French Mirage F-1. But what made the Flogger truly unique was its radical use of variable sweep wings, AEO, design feature intended to marry the agility of low-speed dogfighting with the blistering speed of high-altitude interception. Yet despite its innovation and widespread deployment, the MiG-23 earned a reputation as a difficult, unforgiving aircraft whose strengths were often overshadowed by its many vices. Birth of a variable geometry fighter. The genesis of the MiG-23 can be traced back to the early 1960s, when the Soviet Air Force, VVS, recognized the limitations of its existing fleet. Aircraft like the MiG-21 Fishbed, while agile and fast, suffered from short-range, limited radar capability and a narrow combat envelope. As NATO developed increasingly sophisticated bombers and strike aircraft, notably the B-1 Lancer and F-111, Aardvark, the USSR required a more versatile interceptor that could patrol vast airspace, engage enemy aircraft beyond visual range, BVR, and deliver precision strikes if needed. Enter the Mikoyan-Gurevich Design Bureau. After experimenting with fixed-wing successors to the MiG-21, designers settled on variable geometry, swing-wing technology, inspired by Western developments like the American F-111 and the European Panavia Tornado. The variable sweep wing could be adjusted mid-flight. Wings swept forward, 16° for takeoff, landing, and low-speed maneuvering. Partially swept, 45° for cruise efficiency. And fully swept back, 72° for supersonic dash and high-speed interception. This promised a best-of-both-worlds solution, a fighter that could loiter, dash, and fight across a wide operational spectrum. The MiG-23 first flew in June 1967 and entered service in 1970. It quickly became the backbone of Soviet frontline aviation, eventually produced in over 5,000 units, making it the most numerous variable sweep combat aircraft in history. Performance, power, and promise powered by a single Tumansky R-29 turbojet engine, the MiG-23 could achieve speeds up to Mach 2.35 at altitude, with a service ceiling exceeding 60,000 feet. Its thrust-to-weight ratio was respectable, especially in later models like the MiG-23ML, which featured improved engines and lighter airframes. The aircraft boasted a combat radius of around 800 miles and could carry a diverse payload: air-to-air missiles, including the R-23-24 semi-active radar-guided missiles, unguided rockets, free-fall bombs, and even nuclear ordnance. Its radar, initially the RP-22 Sapphire, later upgraded to the Sapphire 23ML, gave the Flogger a genuine BVR engagement capability, a significant leap from the MiG-21's gun and heat-seeker doctrine. This allowed Soviet pilots to engage NATO aircraft without entering visual range, theoretically neutralizing the West's superior dogfighting tactics. But while the MiG-23 looked formidable on paper, reality proved far more complicated. The vices of the Flogger. Ask any pilot who's flown the MiG-23, Soviet, Warsaw Pact, or even defector, and they'll likely describe a plane that demanded respect, if not outright fear. The MiG-23's vices were numerous and often deadly. Poor low-speed handling. Despite its forward-swept wing configuration for takeoff and landing, the MiG-23 was notoriously unstable at low speeds. Its high wing loading and lack of leading-edge slats meant it stalled abruptly and without warning. Recovery from a stall or spin was difficult, and in some configurations nearly impossible. Soviet pilots were trained to avoid sustained turning fights below 300 knots, essentially conceding the classic dogfight to more agile Western fighters like the F-15 and F-16. Dangerous takeoff and landing characteristics. The MiG-23 required long, well-maintained runways and was prone to ground loops and asymmetric thrust issues during takeoff. Its narrow landing gear and high approach speed left little margin for error. Many accidents occurred during routine landings, especially in adverse weather. Export customers, particularly in the Middle East and Africa, suffered disproportionately due to less advanced infrastructure and training. Limited rear visibility. The cockpit sat far forward, and the high-mounted engine and fuselage hump blocked nearly all rear visibility. Pilots were effectively flying blind behind them, a critical flaw in an era where the lookout factor remained vital even with radar. Later models attempted to mitigate this with rear-view periscopes, but these were inadequate. Unreliable avionics and radar. Early Sapphire radars were temperamental and struggled to distinguish targets from ground clutter, especially in look-down, shoot-down scenarios. Combined with the aircraft's poor maneuverability, this made the Flogger vulnerable to low-flying NATO strike packages. Additionally, the fire control system was complex and unforgiving, requiring precise pilot inputs that were hard to deliver in combat stress. Aerodynamic instability at high speeds. At Mach 2+, the MiG-23 became directionally unstable. Sudden control inputs or turbulence could induce violent yaw or pitch oscillations. Pilots were warned to avoid abrupt maneuvers at high speeds, undermining one of the aircraft's supposed advantages. Combat record, mixed at best. The MiG-23 saw extensive combat use far beyond Soviet borders. It was exported to over 30 countries, including Syria, Egypt, Iraq, Libya, Cuba, and India. In these theaters, its performance was a study in contradictions. During the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Syrian and Egyptian MiG-23s engaged Israeli F-4s and Mirage 3s. While Soviet doctrine emphasized BVR strikes, poor pilot training and Israeli electronic warfare superiority led to lopsided losses. The Flogger's lack of agility in close combat proved fatal when forced into turning engagements. In the Iran-Iraq War, 1980-1988, Iraqi MiG-23s fared slightly better, using their speed and radar to launch missile attacks against Iranian F-14 Tomcats. However, the Tomcat's superior AWG-9 radar and AIM-54 Phoenix missiles often turned the tables, and many Floggers were shot down before they could close to effective range. Perhaps the most infamous engagement involving the MiG-23 occurred in 1989, when a Libyan Flogger was shot down by U.S. Navy F-14s over the Mediterranean, a stark reminder of its obsolescence against modern Western fighters. Soviet pilots in Afghanistan used the MiG-23 MLD primarily in ground attack roles, where its speed and payload were assets. But even there, its vulnerability to man-pads, man-portable air defense systems, and poor low-altitude handling led to significant losses. Legacy, a necessary but flawed step. Despite its vices, the MiG-23 was a necessary evolutionary step for Soviet aviation. It forced the USSR to develop BVR combat tactics, digital avionics integration, and multi-role capabilities, lessons that directly informed the design of its successor, the MiG-29 Fulcrum and the Su-27 Flanker. Moreover, its swing-wing design influenced later Soviet aircraft like the Su-24 Fencer. Ironically, the MiG-23's greatest contribution may have been psychological. NATO took the Flogger seriously, so seriously that it shaped Western threat assessments and training doctrines throughout the 1970s and 1980s. Red flag exercises often featured simulated MiG-23s, and the aircraft became a staple of aggressor squadrons modeling Soviet tactics. Yet for all its ambition, the MiG-23 remains a cautionary tale about the perils of overreaching design. It attempted to be everything, a high-speed interceptor, a strike fighter, and a dogfighter, but excelled at none. Its swing-wing mechanism added weight, complexity, and maintenance headaches without delivering the promised agility. In the end, it was a transitional aircraft, neither the last of the old gunfighters nor the first of the modern digital warriors. Conclusion: the Flogger's paradox, the MiG-23. Flogger stands as a paradox of cold, war engineering, revolutionary in concept, compromised in execution. It embodied the Soviet Union's desire to match and surpass the West through technological audacity. Yet it exposed the limits of that approach when divorced from human factors and operational realism. Pilots feared it, tacticians struggled with it, and adversaries often outmaneuvered it. But it flew, aggressively, widely, and with a snarling presence that defined an era of air warfare. Today, the MiG-23 lingers in the inventories of a handful of nations, mostly retired or relegated to secondary roles. Museums display it as a relic of an age when swing wings and analog cockpits defined the cutting edge. But to aviation historians and Cold War scholars, the Flogger remains a compelling subject, not because it was great, but because it was so boldly, tragically flawed. In its wings, swept back in defiance of physics and pilot comfort, lies the story of a superpower reaching for the sky, only to find that the sky demands more than raw speed and sweeping ambition.